Hello again. Today I will explore some of the key takeaways that I find to be the most meaningful from some of the more recent geopolitical conflicts of this era. The purpose behind this video is to highlight some of the many echoes of past events through the lens of the same lessons iterated into the future, if that makes any sense. Essentially, exploring modern applications of the lessons or ideas or concepts that have been revealed time and time again through war and conflict, in our history. First and foremost is the ironic amount of ethnic hate that was cultivated against the Russian people over the course of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. You will find in no small amounts genuine hatred and resentment towards a people that for the most part had no involvement in their government's actions whatsoever. What I find so interesting about this observation was from whom this message was propagated. Left-leaning people who are otherwise very supportive of the LGBTQ movement, racial equality, and essentially the advocacy for people being trudged on by whatever structures may be oppressing them. These such people who claim themselves paragons of virtue, when masked with the veil of anonymity, reveal their true colors in the form of hate and the devaluing of Russian lives. All of whom I believe can be attributed to the nature of how this conflict was covered in the media itself, but that's a point for another video. Mind you, I don't intend to shill for the Russian side of the war. I think their government has put their people into a terrible spot, especially with conscription forcing men who otherwise weren't willing to fight into war. Personally, I think it's a useless and wasteful conflict, bringing cousins and relatives to war with one another over the retarded geopolitics of their nation's leaders. Nonetheless, with the internet, the consequences are laid bare for all to see. A minority of the ones rooting for the underdog have come to hate what they perceive as the aggressor and everything related to it. In our case, for their ethnicity of origin. Then, they cultivate an image of anti-Russian sentiment by virtue of being the vocal minority about these things, as the majority doesn't tend to express baseline opinions along the lines of, the value of human life, regardless of affiliation, should be conserved. That would serve to counter divisive sentiments. Instead, we get only the signal from this minority. But these things are broadly assumed by most people. Most people assume that the value of human life, regardless of affiliation, is, something. There is a value there, and that we shouldn't be wantonly wasting it here and there. Right? That's assumed by people. And by proxy, they don't require the continual reinforcement that is required of opinions that deviate significantly from this norm. Like for example, something like flat Earth, which is something that most people don't believe, and so by proxy needs to consistently kind of solidify itself and explain its own existence over and over, right? In order to justify its place, as an idea. By consequence, though, these kind of, we'll say neutral ideas, these normal ideas, are not shared nearly as often as they should be. And thus when the crowd keeps its silence, the minority perception inflates in perceived size and almost becomes an oppressive presence in and of itself. Right? So suppose we didn't share much about round Earth. We didn't have people trying to consistently prove round Earth in our media, because it's kind of assumed. Then the flat earthers are the only ones making an actual argument towards the structure of the Earth. In general media, we'll say, not in academia, because that idea will not fly. Then the media consensus is it's going to shift a little more towards that, because maybe not no one, there is a smaller amount of people trying to prove the thing everyone already believes, right? This is a shit transition, but I believe a similar event occurred with regards to the extent of anti-Semitism in 1940s Germany. This is one of the main takeaways or points of connection I found to ring true across the years, that when there is the appearance of majority consensus on a matter, more moderate public opinion can be warped to allow or excuse the treatment of others. In Germany's case, it was the widespread mild anti-Semitism, I'll call it, spearheaded by a minority of very hateful people that was left unchecked due to the aforementioned phenomena and the, we'll say, upward social growth, or social mobility, not social mobility, economic growth that political party at the time was providing. This is all from my perspective and understanding of the events, mind you. I'm not the authority on these matters. But I do believe this perceptual bias had a very strong role in allowing the events of the Holocaust to take place. That people assumed that the group sentiment was more negative towards this group because they aren't hearing as much of the reverse, right? Because everyone's collectively assuming that the group sentiment is thus, and terrible government and all, Gestapo. You don't want to speak out against that. You don't want to be the one to kind of spark that fire, because it's a gamble. You don't know if everyone agrees with you or if everyone doesn't, right? But then again, there's another matter, and you can ask, what is there to be done after the electoral system has already dictated your oppressor? It's already shoehorned in this person that's got their own agenda and has their own goals and intentions out of being the leader of the country, right? In the grand scheme of things, though, the iteration of this phenomena in our time is inconsequential. There is no use in making a mountain out of a molehill, as such anti-Russian sentiments in these iterations and how it plays out in the world currently, they don't have the wherewithal to result in anything significance taking place. Like, nothing's happening. There's people on Twitter bitching about Russian people and insulting them, and it's really strange to observe. There's people on Instagram doing that. There's people everywhere doing that, right? It's very dehumanizing. I'm not Russian. I have a single friend who is, and he's like a mix of like vaguely European. Right? I don't have allegiances there, but it's still kind of fucked up when the kind of shit you read from people who, whatever. Nonetheless, the point was to observe this effect across these two periods of time. The insignificance is in large part due to media attention, I believe. Had the Russia-Ukraine war not been phased out of Western media attention in favor of more recent developments, I believe public opinion within certain spheres would have continued to shift farther and farther towards this direction, this anti-Russian kind of... I don't want to say pro-Ukraine, because pro-Ukraine is not necessarily anti-Russia, I don't believe. Anti-Russian, there. Being in support of this country that is in a shit situation, shit situation, does not necessarily imply that you hate the entire group of people associated with the cause. You wanna, if you're gonna hate anyone, hate the guys who caused this. Hate the bureaucrats, right? Hate the government structures. Don't hate the people. The people are just they're just trying to get by. That's how people are. Anyhow, perhaps only then, after we had, if we were to have had more media attention, only then we would have seen something come of the matter. But for now, it's limited to the select fools here and there online, still denigrating people who I personally believe were largely coerced into doing things they otherwise wouldn't have, whether it be by threat of imprisonment or through a perverse monetary incentive. A lot of people would do a lot of fucked up things to get out of poverty, and I'm willing to bet these paragons of morality, these real angels, these saints we are so privy to, would act in similar such ways when placed in similar such circumstances, right? We're all people, and there's no use to trying to pretend that you're like lauding yourself over others, right? We're all people, and if you are made to starve and made to like live in the dirt, I think you'd probably want to get the hell out of there, and you'd do a lot to get the hell out of there. Most people would, at least I think so. The point here is that when the crowd stays silent, like this is the main ethos, the acting minority gets their way every time, despite any large differences in orientation and belief. When it's political, this seems to result in persecution towards a given group of people, seeing as politicians like to scapegoat certain groups of people, as being responsible for the set of problems their structure created, because God forbid you take accountability over what the hell you guys did. And off the top of my head, I can't immediately think of any other examples to the contrary, so we're sticking with that. In such cases, it is important not to lose your empathy. Always look at people as what they are, people, not images or, manifestations of something else entirely. When you start to look at people as images instead of humans, this is my metaphor, an image of crime, an image of violence, an image of like immorality, etc., you take away probably the strongest element involved in like humanization, which is the trait of humanity itself. I've talked about this before, but the more you see things in that light, the more you automatically make that distinction, and it's only until that belief is challenged that you can see people for what they are. We are animals in the end. We are all people, right? And that, I really do believe that is a super important sentiment, because we are far closer to one another and more similar to one another than so much of media would like us to believe. But with that being said, that should be all for now. I think I had a little more to talk about, but I didn't flesh the ideas out soon enough. Maybe I'll explore more. Thank you for watching, and if you have any additional thoughts or criticism's a big one. That one's very useful. It tells me exactly what I'm doing wrong, because I know I'm doing a couple things a little strangely. Feel free to leave a comment. I will read them all. Thank you.